Hello and welcome to Hockey Talkie. My name's Clay. Thank you for tuning in. The Blackhawks prospect camp is just about to start. It starts next week, Monday, runs through Friday, just a full week affair. So I wanted to put out a little video here to kind of discuss it, kind of talk about some of the players, some of the names that you kind of want to keep your eye out for. Now, there are 38 players who are invited to this week-long development camp. There were 37, but because of Joki Harju trade, there are now 38. I will talk about that later. But of the 38 players, 25 of them are original draft picks by the Blackhawks, which means there's a good chunk of players that you should probably recognize, or at least have heard their names once or twice before, just from the media, just from the draft. But of the 38 players, not all of them are under contract by the Hawks. So there are probably some players that you have no idea who they are. You've never heard their names before. And I'm going to tell you right now, that is all right. That is completely normal. The fact of the matter is, most of these players, whether they're under contract by the Hawks or not, will never make the NHL. That's just the reality of professional sports, especially this day and age with the NHL, where professional rosters don't really have spots for non-skilled guys. They don't have spots for just goons. If you're going to make the NHL, you have to be a really good hockey player. And these prospects are all really good hockey players in the relative sense, but the difference between these guys and NHLers, well, the difference is not very big, but it makes all the difference. But don't get too down on that. There are still a group of players, 5-ish or so, that will be at this week-long event that you're going to be watching, and they will be eventually in the NHL. You will be able to see future NHL players and potentially stars at this week-long development camp. So with that said, who are these players that you should be looking out for? Starting with the forwards, now there are some notable players who we won't actually be able to see, unfortunately. They were invited to camp, but they're only going to be participating in off-ice workouts, so we won't actually be able to see them on the ice. It sucks, it's sad, but it is what it is. Those players, those notable players, Evan Barratt, who had a fantastic sophomore year at Penn State this past season, 43 points in 32 games. He'll be returning to Penn State for his junior year, so keep an eye out for his name, even though you don't get to see him at this prospect camp. Hopefully you'll see him somewhere in the highlight reel come the winter. And then also Dominik Kubalik, who we acquired in a trade from the Los Angeles Kings, a guy who many, I think, and also the Blackhawks expect to make the opening night roster. So another big name who we won't actually be able to see at prospect camp, but keep an eye out for his name come training camp. Now, in terms of forwards, you will be able to see out on the ice. Big one, obviously, is Kirby Dach, number 3 overall pick this year, a guy who has a chance to make the opening night roster, and he might. But I personally don't think he'll be a mainstay this year. He'll probably be playing back in juniors, and that's completely fine. Most number 3 overall picks actually need a year. Jonathan Toews needed a year. So don't get discouraged if you don't see perfection from him. He's still 18 years old. He's still developing. He's going to be a good player. But it's exciting because we'll be able to see him for the first time in a Blackhawks uniform. Also, MacKenzie Entwistle, who had a fantastic OHL season with the Gulf Storm, helped them get very far in the OHL playoffs before bowing out. Had a great playoffs as well. It'll be interesting to see how he does. Another player who had a really good junior season, Brandon Hagel, who you may not recognize his name because he hasn't been a Blackhawk prospect for very long. Just back in October, his rights with the Buffalo Sabres actually ended, and we swooped in and picked him up. He ended up having 102 points through 66 games this year for the Red Deer Rebels in the WHL. Had a great season there. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs in this prospect camp. Then you have Philipp Kurashev, who had a good World Championships. Had some really nifty goals as well. Keep an eye out for those forwards. In terms of defensemen, we have our 2 2018 first-round draft picks back again for the second straight year in the prospect camp. Adam Boqvist, Nicolas Beaudin. They won't be playing in the NHL this year, but don't get discouraged. They're still on very good development tracks right now, and it'll be interesting to see how they have improved since last year's prospect camp. Ian Mitchell, another big name to look at, drafted second round 2017 after Jokiharju, but now that Jokiharju has been traded, he's moved up the prospect depth chart. A guy that remains unsigned, but there's rumors circulating that the Blackhawks and his camp are going to be talking about signing a contract hopefully soon. I think with Jokiharju getting moved and his path becoming a little bit clearer, I think that probably helps the cause to sign him. But he's a guy who had a very good year at the University of Denver last season. He's been named captain for this upcoming year, so keep an eye out for him. Watch him in this prospect camp. He's an interesting prospect and a guy that could have a very bright future. And then the last defenseman to keep your eye out for, at least in my eyes, is Alex Vlasic, a second-round draft pick this year. You will not be able to miss him out on the ice because he stands 6'6". So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that tower of a player looks on skates. In terms of goaltenders, the biggest name, Alexis Gravel, who had a very good year with the Halifax Mooseheads this year. They finished second in the QMJHL. They were in the Memorial Cup because they were hosting it, and although they were hosting and got an automatic bid, like I said, they finished second in the Q. They were a really good team. Alexis Gravel was part of that, had a good year, had a great Memorial Cup run as well. They almost won it. They were in the final. They lost. But look out for him. Let's see how he does. And then also Dominic Basse, who we drafted this year, 6'6" goaltender. Yeah, that's Ben Bishop size. So check him out as well. Those are going to be their two goaltender big names to look out for. Now, remember, I said there were 37 original players invited to this camp. Now there are 38 because of the Jokiharju trade. I could have included Alexander Nylander into the forwards group, but I kind of wanted to separate himself out because he's an interesting case, because he's the return on a trade, because he's the only player in this camp that has NHL experience, even though it's only 19 games. Alexander Nylander has a lot of pressure on him because he's the return for Henri Jokiharju. Because he hasn't quite panned out, even with the crazy skill set that he may have, he hasn't shown a whole lot with the Buffalo Sabres in that organization. And so he is interesting to watch because I don't actually think you really want to look at how he performs necessarily in this prospect camp. Obviously, you want him to do well. He should do well, considering he's played in the NHL before. But I think what you really want to pay attention to with Alexander Nylander here is see how he does in the prospect camp and just keep note of it. And then come training camp, watch how he does there and see the difference. See the progress that he has made. Because if we're going to give him his fair due here, we need to give him some time to develop under the Blackhawks organization. So don't just judge him based on this prospect camp. Let's take this prospect camp as a baseline for him and see how he improves from now until training camp. So those are the players you want to look out for, at least in my eyes. The prospect camp practices are going to be Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. They will not be broadcasted anywhere. However, if it's like previous years, media guys, Mark Lazarus, Scott Powers, other media members, they're going to be posting clips and GIFs and phone video of players doing drills. They'll be posting them on Twitter, so follow them and keep track. That's probably how you're going to be able to see them if you're not in town. If you are in town and you're free during those times, I highly recommend going and trying to watch one of the practices and watch the drills because it's just a unique experience to watch an NHL level, practice and NHL type of skills and drills and these players and, like I said, potentially future Blackhawks. So highly recommend if you have the time, you're not working, you're out of school for the summer, whatever, try and make it down. Otherwise, if you can't, Friday, 9 a.m. will be a scrimmage, and that will be broadcasted on Blackhawks.com. It'll be streaming, so that'll be your last chance or, worst case scenario, that'll be your chance to see, actually see these guys play, even if you're not in town. So that's it. There is your 2019 Blackhawks Prospect Camp preview. Let me know if there is a certain player that I may have not said, or perhaps there is a certain player I did say that you are really going to be looking out for. Let me know down in the comments section below. I will put a link to the full roster in the description of this video if you want to check that out. Like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate that as always. But most importantly, stay safe, make good decisions, and I'll see you next time.